Okay, let's look at Power Grid, The First Sparks. Now this is a game that actually got a copy of off of Mouse. I think it was one of his review copies. I don't know if he ever got around to doing a review for it, but he was not thrilled with the game for some reasons. I don't understand those, and offered it to me. And I said, hey, cool, man, I've been kind of looking at this. I really, really liked Power Grid. And this has that same, brand name on it. And it turns out it actually has a similar system. It certainly has some, physical similarities with these little cards that are producing stuff. Stuff is generic in this in the same way as energy was generic in Power Grid. What's not generic in... What is generic here that's not generic in Power Grid is how you produce the stuff. It's a little bit... there's a little bit to it here, but instead of collecting bunches of things that you have to buy and put on your factory and crank the energy out with that stuff, and that stuff has varying, values as a commodity, here, what you're going to be doing is working on these tiles and picking up resources based on what you're next to. So in this case, this would produce fish, and this would produce mammoths. Okay, great. Well, each different type of resource has a value, a food value. So mammoths are worth 4 food, fishies are worth 3, and so on. Okay, sounds kind of interesting. I'm also somewhat intrigued by, and I'm getting Factory Manager. Won that in an auction and should be seeing that sometime soon. I don't know when I'll get that to the table. But anyway, my wife and I played this the day we got it. She loved the little animeeples, which she doesn't quite understand how to pronounce. But anyway, she thought they were very cute and loved the pictures on these cards. Really, really wanted to try it. And we'd played Power Grid already, so we gave it a try. And I don't know, neither of us walked away with too great an impression of it. So let's take a look at what the rules are like, and we'll do a playthrough. See if my opinion changes a little bit based on playing it solo. Although, this, like Power Grid, is certainly a game where the dynamics and the fast play are going to make it better when you're actually playing opposed. It's not designed for solo play, but that's how I do things. Alright, let's take a look at what the rules are like. First of all, the rules are just as annoying as Power Grid's. This is a simpler game, and Power Grid's not a complex game, but they seem to manage to fill, not fill 8 pages. There's, I think, this, which may actually be better than the rulebook itself once you get kind of used to things as kind of a synopsis. As well, there's player aid cards that give you the sequence of play and some of the costs, as well as the value of the stuff. All very helpful things. But wading through these rules is just painful. This has to be about the worst kind of rule design that I can cope with at all, and it can only work on such a simple game. The fact that a game this simple has bloated to 8 pages of rules is painful, and it has to do with using pictures, with trying to explain things pictographically linked to these numbers. It just doesn't work, and I don't know if it's a translation thing, but it's worse than most of the things that try to work with these pictures. It follows this very procedural type of design, where it says, oh, here's how you set up the game, and just so many steps explaining in that. Too much effort on the different cards, too many little pieces of information on each card, trying to suck that all in at once. I don't know. And then when you actually get to the play, well, there's almost nothing. There really is almost nothing. We're talking about this. It's got the same kind of weirdness to the sequence of play where somebody's the first player, but invariably for almost all actions is going last. Which sort of plagues Power Grid as well. I think it's sort of some kind of weird design issue to call somebody first player and make them go last in the majority of the sequence locations, but whatever. All right, so let's take a look at what we're going to do. First of all, there is some stuff with the setup, and we'll take a look at what the different things are. First, the players set these tiles up, kind of like in a Magic Realm type game, where one person puts one out, and then they start connecting, and then the next one has to be connected to two of the remaining. And I don't know how many limitations there are to that. We can look at it. But the basic thing is you build your own little world. And it's built out of random tiles that you draw in each game. And the size of the game is determined by the number of players. And it means that this is where your real variance in the game is. You're going to have a different map each time, which means different resources. You know, so for example, with this setup, let's say we're just using 3 tiles, which I think is the 2-player game, or 3-player game, and maybe 4 as well. Well, you got only 1 fish, 1 bear, 1 berry, but 3 mammoths. And this is actually the 3 tiles that my wife and I used. And it created a real, the mammoth was a big deal. Now, it turned out that only 1 card that generated mammoths, that allowed me to hunt mammoths, was in the deck before we finished the game, right? I mean, it could come out at any time because the cards come out like they do in Power Grid. All right, so that meant the fact that I was able to get that card was a bonus. And the way that you get cards in this is a little different than in Power Grid. In Power Grid, you bid on cards. Here you don't. Here you just buy them. Let's take a look at what a card has on it. It's got a number of things. It's got a number like in Power Grid, which indicates sort of the advancement of the technology. And the low number cards are available first, and they kind of fade away to be replaced by higher number cards. And there's a mechanism to bury cards under a reshuffle, just like there is in Power Grid. Second number here is the cost. This is what you pay for the card. It's not the least you pay for the card, it is what you pay. If you're buying that card, you get it at that price. And then this is what it produces. Well, this is the simplest thing, which just produces grain. These are sort of a fixed income idea. They're kind of like the windmills in a way, and the advanced technologies in Power Grid. But you actually start with one of these, a very low 1-pointer at the beginning of the game, herbs. These just produce a fixed amount of points. Nothing you do on the board matters for this. Great. However, something like this fishing rod says, okay, if fish are plentiful, you get more of them. But if fish are rare, if people have been depleting the fish stocks, which are kept track of up here, and here in particular, and there'll be little fish here, and that indicates how many there are. And you'll be taking from there when you eat, when you catch fish, okay? So if there's a lot of fish in there, say 5 or more, you get to grab 3 of them. But if there's only 1 or 2, you only get to grab 1. And that's kind of where sort of the neatness to this game lies, is that ability to try to project in the future how rare different commodities are going to be. And that's very similar to the Power Grid thinking process, right? You look and you say, there's only one thing out there that uses garbage. Garbage is going to be, you know, easy for me to get because it'll be cheap. Well, likewise with this. With me looking, there was only 1 mammoth card. Great. Mammoth or bonus across here. Excellent. That means that I want mammoths. Now, we'll get that in a little bit. In addition to these, which are sort of your power plant type cards, you also have knowledge. Knowledge is stuff like fire. It gives you a special ability. In this case, your food doesn't rot. It also says you can hide your food. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means that you can just not show it to the other players, or if there's some event in the game where hiding food is important. We played, you can just not show it and never saw anything to indicate otherwise. The rules themselves are kind of vague on this, as with the card-driven war games. Sometimes things are expected to be explained in the cards, and you don't know whether or not you're dealing with some specific term that's hidden somewhere that you can't find in the rules. In this case, I think we got it right, that you're actually just allowed to hide the amount of food you have. Okay. So let's take a look here. You get a number of pieces, la la la. What else is there? At the beginning of the game, you're going to start off with one little dude who you get to put on the board. And you mark him here. Now, in the two-player game, there's sort of a third player. He's sort of a ghost player who doesn't play with these cards. He doesn't hunt, but he does spread around and clutter up the board, which makes it more difficult to expand. It becomes an interesting little factor in the game. Otherwise, I think the game would be very boring in two. And it is vaguely interesting, there's no question. Alright. So, after you place these, and I don't remember what order you go, it's in reverse player order. Everything's in reverse player order, right? Except like one thing. Going first is bad. You do not want to go first. And it's the penalty for the guy who's doing the best. Basically, this is going to be, and this is the same as in Power Grid, the ordering of the players in terms of who's the closest to winning. And then, well, because they wanted to say you're the first player because you're doing the best, well, that means you go last in almost every action there. In this case, at the beginning of the game, the players are determined completely randomly for order. But then, I think whoever has the highest numbered card becomes the first player. That's one of the tiebreakers. Anyway, after you place your pieces in reverse order here, then you're allowed to go backwards, I believe. Right? No, you go back with the... No, you go backwards to the real first player, who's, of course, the last person to go at all the time. Yeah, it's the sensible. So let's say we had two players, and yellow was the last player, and they placed already. Then blue would be able to place a piece. Now blue has the option to place another piece, just a second one. If they do so, they have to pay certain prices. Now, you're referred to this chart in the rules and told by the rules of this chart. The way this chart works is if you're putting one new clan member, you pay 1. If you're putting 2 down, you pay 3, etc., up to 5. And there's some additional costs if you're crossing a mountain space, these little rocks, or if you're entering a space that another or other players are in. Okay? What the setup, and this card doesn't really make clear, is whether or not you get the first piece for free, but whether or not the second piece you have to pay for 2 pieces. What is the price? Is it 1, 2, 3 for adding that second piece? We just said, it's going to cost 1 piece. The first piece was free, so the second piece we'll just make it regular cost. But those kind of questions come to my mind, at least. I'm sure we did it right. But there's this fuzziness throughout the rules where, you know, there wasn't a lot of care taken in either putting them together well. All the care was taken in getting lots of colors and getting a shine and a gloss that makes it hard to read and stuff like that. Anyway, yeah, I love Eurogame rules. Yeah, okay, and it's great to see that wargaming is beginning to move towards Euros and Ameritrash games in terms of role quality, because pretty soon I won't be able to understand them at all. So, after you set up your clans, now you again determine player order. And from now on it's determined as follows. The person who has the most people on the board is the first player, which of course means they go last. And by the way, I like ducks, which is why I put my meeples this way instead of that way. I have duckles. Okay. And no, I don't know if I'm going to be playing that way, but I was with my wife because it pissed her off to no end. So there's a tiebreaker here, which is the highest numbered card you have. If you have the same number of people as someone else, whoever has the highest number card is the first player. You have a richer card. Well, at the beginning of the game, there's 6 cards, 1 through 6. You're giving them randomly, and to tell you the truth, it's a bone to just get that highest one because they're all worth the same. Except for this one thing. Okay. Now, after you do this placement and set up your player order, and say, oh, there we go. And let's say there's a couple of blue pieces on the board and a yellow piece, whatever. Oh, okay. Now we start playing the game proper. And at this point, what you're going to be doing is following each step in here. And there's 4. Buying technology, going hunting and feeding your clan, spreading the clan, and bureaucracy. And you'll see here the order. This begins with the first player, buying a new technology. That's because this is the one thing where you're boned to go first. And then the next 2 are beginning with the last player. And then the final one is pretty much simultaneous. Okay, so buying a technology. There's going to be a set of cards up here, and I think it's 4 in the normal. There's the shuffle card. 4 in the normal game. And they're going to be divided into 2, we'll go with this, into 2 sets. Just like in Power Grid. What you're going to have is the lowest valued cards, and they're going to be in order like this. I'll be on top. Those are available for anybody to purchase, basically. There's no bidding in this. And then there's the futures market, as it were, which is things that are on the horizon, but they may never make it, right? They could end up buried or whatever. Well, so what the first player does is he has a choice to pick one of these cards, one of the top cards. And he says, I want to buy this. And now, and 2 players, I'm not sure what the order was, but let's see. If the player chooses, the player furthest down in the player order, okay, so I think that's towards the last position, has the first option on that card, really. So if I'm the first player, I can pick one of these cards and offer it up for deal, but it's everyone else who gets a chance to take it before I do. And if they take it, they just pay the cost. They don't bid on it, they don't play anything along those lines. Well, so in the 2-player game, there's a little fill-up to that, which is, well, let's go to the base rule. Well, if nobody else wants it, if the person who put it up for bid is the only person, if everyone else has passed on it, then they must buy it. In the 2-player game, there's a fill-up to this. They can throw one card away. So you can put something out that you think the other person wants to force them to buy it so you get whatever you want. Anyway, once a card is bought, another card is drawn from the top of the pile and slapped down, and everything's reordered to fit that card in there. Great. All right. Now, at the beginning of this bidding thing, a food, it's a 1-point food, is put on top of the lowest valued cards. And this is kind of a benefit for whoever picks this up. So if you buy this, you get this food and you can use it towards the cost of the card, which means I could get this basket for free if I pick it up. Now you're only allowed to have 3 tools. Tools are these producing things. Fields count as tools, baskets count as tools. Fire is knowledge though. Fire does not count as tools. You can have an infinite amount of those, but of knowledges, you can't pair up on knowledges. If you have fire, you can't grab another fire to try to deprive somebody of it. All right. So, after everybody's gotten an option to put one card up, and once you buy a card, you're no longer eligible to grab another card, just like in Power Grid. Then you go hunting and feed your clan. And this is the production side. This is where you're making your energy. Well, what are you doing here? What you're doing in basis is you gotta have, first of all, these guys are free. You produce them. 7 food, great. I grabbed 7 food. But if I want to produce this basket of berries stuff, I've got to have somebody in my clan next to berries. Okay? And then the number of berries here, as I explained, in the pool, say there's 3 there, determines how many berries I get to pull from the pool. Well, 3 is between 1 and 4, so I would get 1 berry. And I just put that in my food. Now, berries are worth more than plain grain. They're worth 2. Okay. So there's a little bit of calculation that goes on with that. And now, this is a situation where, okay, I've got 1 guy there. Is there any what happens if I've got 2 there? Nothing different. Not a different thing, because I've got 2 people grabbing berries from the same bush. I may want to do this. The victory conditions for the game involve getting the most population. And I can only have 1 piece per space. So I may want to fill these spaces up, but they're not going to do anything for my production. Okay, well, what about if I've got spears, these guys, and I'm set up like this. This is a little different because I'm hunting in 2 different areas. And because of that, I'm allowed to count the number of mammoths that are in here. I'm allowed to add 1 for each additional area that I'm next to. So here, there wouldn't be 2 mammoths in there because I've got 2 different areas I'm next to. There would be 3, which would allow me to take 2 of them, and I could clean the mammoths out. Okay. Now this, it's important to note, is done in reverse player order. The person who's doing the worst gets to go first, which means in 6 players, which is what I'm going to play, there's probably a chance that you can wipe out the pool of produced stuff, of little food producing stuff, before someone else gets a chance. And again, that's like in Power Grid. You can eat up all the raw materials. Here you can grab the food supply, and they don't get anything for it. If there are no more mammoths left, and somebody's got a spear, that's their problem, man. Which could be a strong difficulty towards being in the lead if your technologies don't match well. All right. Now, in this step, and I may have trouble remembering this, you got to feed your clan. You got to give each little guy you got on the map a food. And the food is kind of like change at this point, okay? It's got values. These yellows are change. The yellows and greens, these are 1 points and 3 points of food. There's an infinite supply of them that are kept in here. And if you use them all up, you can get more. But the other food is a little different. So for example, a bear. A bear is worth 3. Now if I spend a bear, he goes into this pool, I can get change back for him. That's not a problem. But if I'm holding bears, well, those bears can't go over on this board. So there might be some value to hoarding certain specific types of food in order to hurt someone else. Of course, it's going to hurt you too, because if you're hoarding that food, you've had, at least at some point, you had the ability to produce it. You may not anymore, though, in which case that's what you want to keep your food as, probably, because it's safer. Now, I missed something here, which is not actually covered in here. Unfortunately, it's not on your game sequence of play, which is the first segment where you buy technology. Ah, yes, it is. There it is. Discarding rotten food. You have to throw out 1/3 of your food, rounded down. The exception to that is if you have fire, you don't have to throw out your food. But basically, if you're walking into the turn with food, if you don't have fire, you will be losing some of that food. Okay. So let's go back. The hunting and feeding, well, you grab your food, you feed your clan. Now you got a pool of food left. Now this food has to last you through two things. One is the expansion phase where you're going to grow on the map. And that expansion phase works very much like the first expansion, except you're not limited to just one more piece. You can expand up to 5 pieces. And the second thing is you need to save food to buy cards for the next turn. You also may need to save food maybe for long-term planning or something. The one difficulty I have with the game is remembering that I have to save food for these cards and remembering how much I want to save. Power Grid, you have to save money. Well, usually you got a big wad of money and you know, you're kind of doing all you can. You might not build one city because I see a card I want to bid on. But in this, you really do have the ability to kind of calculate out how much food exactly you need, and you're usually not building to your maximum in terms of growth because you do really need to buy one of those. I just feel like the need to hold off is more of a complexity for me to play this and a harder thing for me to get than anything in Power Grid. Alright, I'm going to switch vids because this one's run out. Whoa. Wow, I should have killed that. Okay. So where are we? Spreading the clan. It's actually pretty simple. Again, this is done in reverse player order, meaning, of course, the last goes first, as is always the case in here. And what you do is you follow these little strictures here, which is how many clan members you want to buy. You're only allowed to put one in each space. You're allowed to expand only into adjacent spaces. So I can move from this situation into here, but I can also keep going. I can keep stretching my clan forward, at least from what I can understand of the rules. Now, the cost for this would be, say, 2 people. Okay, 2 new clan members. That's going to cost me $3. Since nobody's in there and there's nothing else, that's what it runs as. But let's take some other examples. Let's say I'm sitting here. Okay, to move into here, 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 and here. That looks kind of interesting. Alright. I'm expanding 1, 2, 3, 4 people. That's going to cost me a base of 10 food. Not likely I'm going to be able to do this. Okay, going across a wall costs me 1, so I'm up to 11 food. Going across a wall costs another 1, that's 12 food. Entering a space with someone else means I don't just pay 1 more. I pay 1 per person who's there after I get there. So this is going to cost 2 more. So now I'm up to 14, and this one, no extra cost to either of these two. So it cost me 14 to make this expansion. It would cost $1 more per person who was in here. So, well, let's say this bear is a person. That would cost an extra $1, etc. In general, I think the board's going to fill up pretty quickly in a lot of players. It didn't do so in 2, even though there's a sort of a 3rd player there. And as you add more people, well, you increase how many houses you have, and that's going to affect your player order. Then we go to this bureaucracy phase, where indeed you just see who's got the most people. The guy with the most is the new first player, meaning, of course, that he goes last each turn on just about everything. The tiebreaker on that is highest number on the card. You refill the resources. Now, this is kind of a tricky and cute part to the game. There's this little chart here. It's only here. It's only here in the rules. There's nowhere on the card is, but there's a way to handle that. You cross-reference the number of players there are with the type of resource to determine how many base resources there will be of that type. And then, if there's more than one of the resource tile in the game, for each additional one you add one. Oh, is it just, let me see. No, it's for each hunting area on the board, not more than one. So, let's say we're playing 6 players and we have this set up. Berries. 6 players, there'll be 6 of them. There's one on the board, there's going to be 7 berries. Well, we mark this by putting it like that. And what that means is in this stage of the game, every turn, if there's enough berries in the pool here, 7 new berries go up there. Which means if nobody's gathering a particular resource, it just grows and grows and grows. It doesn't have a price value. It's not like in what is this game even called? Power Grid. Well, it's called Power Trip, which is a totally different game. It's not like in Power Grid, where there's this supply and demand effect in the game, but there is an essential supply and demand in the sense of you don't want to grab cards that other people have unless you know you're going to be drawing before them. And even then, the resource is going to be diminishing more rapidly, so no one's going to get much. Because, of course, you get the lower numbered piece on the board. Okay, so that's how those are determined, and you do that for all 4 basic collectible resources. These guys aren't really collectible. These guys only come from this card or as change when you turn in a real food resource. Okay, and now at the end of the turn, just like in Power Grid, the highest valued one of these gets buried under the deck. And there's going to be this shuffle card at the very bottom of the deck. It's going to go under that. And a new resource is brought up. The marketplace is readjusted. Numerical order. Something I forgot to mention. In the purchase phase, if this first guy, the one with the bonus, isn't bought, it gets discarded from the game and a new one's placed into its place. I think that's the same as in Power Grid as well, where there's going to be this enforced new technology coming out. Even if nobody's buying anything, it's going to happen. There's a little bit of weirdness here once the shuffle card comes out. And again, this is kind of similar to Power Grid. Once it comes out, the, let's see. So the lowest card in the market and the shuffle card disappear, and now you're going to have a 6-card market where it's all available. And that is, again, very similar to the Power Grid structure. Alright. That's about it. Gonna give it a look. See how it works out. Hopefully this one will go up. I don't want to waste a lot of time on this vid. And then we'll start playing in a moment.